I think we should do Alok. We have Alok who's calling in from California. Alok, you are live on Talk Heathen. What's up?
Hey, Emma, Dan. Thanks for taking my call. I've been an atheist for around 10, 15 years, thanks to your shows. And I come from a very technical, scientific background, and so do my friends. So we kind of regrouped after 25 years for our alumni. And I was explaining why I'm an atheist. And there are many people on the fence. Some are because of the fear of hell. Some are because what will be the morality. But most of them, because they come from a Hindu culture, which is deep-rooted in spirituality, their problem was, what will be our spiritual domain? So we have a physical health, we have a mental health, and then what else? Where do you get that from? It's not like a higher power or a higher purpose, but it's like there's something else there. And so sometimes on these shows, we do dismiss that the spirituality is vague and not defined and amalgamous, and I kind of agree. And I don't believe in a spirit within a body or a soul and all that. But there's an intrinsic human need to believe in that kind of thing. And so to find a rebuttal to that becomes very tough because science is still studying consciousness and all that, obviously. And so, first of all, I was thinking we should not be dismissive when someone says spirituality, but because they're not really cuckoo, they're talking about a higher need for their life to get a fulfillment above materialism, right? And so I was wondering what's the best counter argument to that, as opposed to saying that everything is material and we are still researching that. That does not always sound like a good selling point.
Sure. Yeah, this is a great question. And I wanted to, I don't know, do you want to take this one first, Emma? Because I think there's a lot to talk about with this one.
Yeah, so much. I mean, I think part of you're right in that a lot of the leaping in with the scientific is not usually a brilliant response, but it is interesting, and I think it's interesting that there have been a lot of quite recent developments in terms of understanding the self, in the link between brain and body, and the lack of real distinction between those things. It's difficult because when you're trying to convince someone of anything, that's 99% of the time you're going to fail. Sure. It's a near impossible challenge to begin with. In terms of spirituality, I think it's maybe about reframing. So rather than there being the physical, the mental, and the spiritual, it's about understanding that it is broad and vague and amalgamous, and trying to understand that human beings like to have purpose. We are curious. We like to know things. We like to understand things, and that in some ways makes us very scientific and helps us learn things. And in some ways, it makes us very religious because we feel the need to answer the difficult questions. And if somebody comes up with a pretty compelling answer that makes us feel satisfied and ticks all those good brain chemical boxes, then we're likely to believe that. And our tying it to the spiritual, just as using that kind of language, I think is more sort of cultural and social than anything else. I think it's because we and I think it would be really interesting to ask this sort of question of people from different cultures, because certainly us who have grown up with some of the major religions have quite a different probably idea of what it is to be spiritual or to look for higher meaning than some people in other places. I feel like I've just rambled on and said nothing for about 5 minutes.
No. I mean, like that. Well, the thing is too, right? Spirituality is a vague word. I mean, it is just as a fact, right? It's hard to talk about without knowing really what it is we even mean when we say it. and it's a word that we use quite frequently. I generally interpret it, and I think what most people mean, and correct me if you think this is different, Alok, but I think what most people mean when they see spirituality, it's a belief in something greater than themselves, right? I think that's what most people mean when they use spirituality. And so, do human beings have an innate desire for spirituality? Maybe. I don't know, because again, that's kind of a cross-cultural question. I do think human beings like to have hierarchy in some sense. I do think people get a sense out of fulfillment and purpose in the sense that they're doing. None of us like to do pointless tasks. When we think about like what's the most torturous kinds of existences, we think of like the myth of Sisyphus, right? This idea of a guy putting a rock up and down a hill. To us, that's so to a lot of people, that's like the worst kind of torture, because it doesn't actually lead to anything. It doesn't do anything. So like we're kind of problem solving engines. We want to be able, as you said, to kind of figure stuff out, put things into boxes, whether we do it consciously or unconsciously. And a lot of spirituality is kind of answering that question on a universal scale. Instead of looking at, well, what are liquids, solids, and gases, we're kind of looking at, well, what is the human being in the sense of the greater earth, in the sense of the greater universe, right? Like, what are we doing here? What's our place in this whole universe? So like, yeah, I do think broadly speaking, people want to know answers to those questions. That is kind of a bad selling point, I guess, if you want to put it that way, with atheism, right? Because we really don't have the best answers a lot of the time. I mean, a lot of us can point to things like secular humanism and the kind of activism work that we do, or even not even just activism, just having a good time with your friends and family and just enjoying life. And there is merit to that, but for some people that's not satisfying. And so that's what makes talking about some of the issues we face really hard, because they think, well, if we are going to turn people into atheists, we're going to take away their spirituality. And I don't think that's true. I think we still kind of feel that sense. We just kind of get answers from different places. Instead of the Christian system of answers, I'm kind of accepting a more, broadly scientific answer of things. I think that I'm a meat being made of meat parts that somehow give me consciousness, and the fact that AI is slowly kind of turning our heads around on what it even means to be a person, I think is something we should explore even deeper, and maybe we will find some more answers there. But are we taking it away from people? No, I think we're just kind of giving people different answers, and for some people that's not satisfying, right? And that's hard, but I don't know if I can do anything about that, to be honest. So there's my rambling answer, Emma. And now Alok can tell us their thoughts. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you guys. So, like, many of them meditate and they think they've reached a spiritual dimension. Some take LSD or substances and they think they've reached that. The way I see it is that I'm sick and tired of material life. I've been in corporate life for 25 years in the US, and I want to do something else. So my thing is give back to society, right? I'm 46 years old. I've done enough of this. I have a family, so I have responsibilities, so I can't do all of that. But to achieve that, I don't find that those answers in secular humanism per se, because it's pretty bland, right? It's like, so what I try to do is I kind of invent my own. I don't call it spirituality because I don't believe in it, obviously, being an atheist. But it's pretty damn hard to convince, like, my most brilliant friends, and they're entrepreneurs and CEOs in big IT companies and all, and they know the in and outs of it, but this is one thing which gets them stuck.
Yeah, no, it does give people pause, and I think it should. Gosh, I mean, again, there's so many answers to this. Man, who's the philosopher I really like? David Benatar has this book about the name of the book escapes you now, but he kind of defines like human, beings' purpose in like these kinds of three categories. It could be between like interpersonal, as broad as human civilization, and then the universe. And he kind of comes to this conclusion. He says, universally, we don't matter, right? We just don't. In terms of human civilization, only 0.001% of us will maybe even matter at that, out of the billions of people that have ever existed. Some of us may get remembered. And then interpersonally, that's pretty much all we have, is the relationships that we have with each other. And honestly, that's a kind of truth that speaks to me, because if all I really have is my friends and family, and maybe the various people online who have heard my voice, I at least get something out of that. And maybe that's all that I can ask for, because that's a lot more than what a lot of people has ever had. And I can find peace with that. But again, that's a very personalized response. You know, some people look at like the Unitarian Universalists and they think, well, gee, that's kind of funky. A lot of these folks are atheists, but they all kind of go to church together. What's up with that? It's like, because they get something out of that, you know, like that. People really do want to get something out of something. And I think it's great if that's what you do. But maybe that's the thing. Maybe it'll never be a real universal reason. Maybe it just has to be something that we invent for ourselves. I don't know. That's about as much as I can take away from it. But look, we do have to let you go, because we're getting towards the tail end of the show here. I do appreciate you calling in.